This is such a good day. This is such a great day. This is a great day to be a Riverbender. This is a great day to celebrate. It's worth celebrating. It's worth celebrating the legacy and the story of this place. It's worth celebrating 40 years. I'm sure there are a few of you here who remember 1979. I'm getting to the point where it's kind of fuzzy in my memory. I'm sure I was there. But 1979, 40 years ago. I'm sure there are some of you here who have enough history in life that you've lived in Austin for most of your life. I talk to native Austinites all the time, and they say, yeah, I remember Austin 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, and man, has it changed. It has, and I'm not sure it's changed for the better. I'm not sure it's the same place that I remember it being 30 and 40 years ago. And I talk to people all the time who look around at the world we live in, and they kind of say the same thing. They say there are things that happen in our world today that 40 years ago would have been unthinkable. And now they're almost common. The things we could not have even imagined are things that we see with great frequency, and what we would have thought 40 years ago was absolutely impossible happens all the time. So many people look at 40 years and they say, I've seen the trajectory of the world that we live in, and I'm not sure I like where we're headed. I look on the horizon, I look into the future, and I see the storm clouds gathering. I hear the chaos in our society and the incivility. I look around and I hear the thunder in the distance, and I see the lightning flashing off on the horizon. And it doesn't make me optimistic about what the future holds. No, I don't know. I don't know, maybe every generation gets to a point where they look at their children and their children's children, and they are worried. They think that they'll never have it as good as we had it before them. I don't know whether that's gone on generation after generation. What I do know is that many of the places where, when the storms do come and when the chaos is unleashed, many of the places that we used to find refuge in are no longer reliable. They've been damaged, or they're much more vulnerable today than they were 40 years ago. You used to be able to find refuge in your home and in your family, and I find a great place of safety in the idea of family, but I know for increasing numbers of people, that's not true. With all of the social engineering and all of the expanding of the ideas and definitions of what family is, in some ways we've made it better, but in other ways we've made it more fragile. The social structures that used to guide and support us in the difficult days when the storms would roll in, the communities and neighborhoods that used to be so common in our experiences now seem to be rare and hard to find, because we come and go from our rear entry garages with our remote controls, and we live hermetically sealed lives where we have no relationships with the people on our right or on our left or even across the street. We barely know our neighbors. We substitute what used to be genuine face-to-face interaction, and then that kind of got morphed into phone calls. Like if you had a child, someone might come over and bring you a gift, and then it was thoughtful to make a phone call, and then it was enough to send an email, and then it was enough to send a text. And we live in a day where it's enough just to push a like on a page on social media and say, this is what relationships look like, and the security and the safety and the refuge we found in that feels hard to come by. But as the storm clouds gather and the thunder roars in the distance, the thing that I think that has most disappointed me in its change is the churches in our world. Because under the name of creating a healthy community, they have valued inclusion at the cost of exclusion. They have valued people thinking and being the same way, and they have excluded from the grace and the love of Christ the very people who most desperately need shelter. The people on whom the storms of life are most brutal, and the cry of their heart is for the hope and the grace that should be found in a place of faith. That's why we celebrate this place today. We celebrate this place because from the very beginning and for the last 40 years, this place has represented a refuge for the bruised and the battered and the broken and the bored, for those who are beaten up in life, for those who are looking for second chances, for those who need new beginnings, for those who believe that their faith is not strong enough to see them through. These doors are open and say, come and walk with us. And we celebrate that today as the storms rage around us and the chaos seems to close into us. It's more important than ever that we remember our values and we remember our mission and we make it our future. I think this is what Jesus was trying to communicate, because he saw the storm coming. The storm had been brewing since he entered the human experience when God became man and tore through the fabric of time and space. There was a storm that was unleashed. And over the course of his life, it grew in the background. And then as he approached his destiny at Calvary, the storm clouds grew darker and the thunder grew louder, but he was the only one who could see it. He was the spiritual meteorologist who began to predict to his followers that the dark days were coming. The storm was on the horizon, and he could hear the thunder in the distance. In the 9th chapter of Luke, it brings us to the last weeks of Jesus' life, and Luke records for us that Jesus said to his disciples, take heart, pay attention to what you're seeing and what you're hearing, to take advantage of your time with me, because it's not going to last. The day is coming when the Son of Man will be handed over to the hands of men. By the end of Luke chapter 9, the storm has built and is encroaching on the disciples. And it says that Jesus resolutely turned his face toward the storm and went up to Jerusalem for the last time. And as he leaned in and pressed into the gathering storm, they came to a village. Luke records for us that it was a certain village. We know that it was the village of Bethany. Bethany was 2.5 miles north, 3 kilometers north of Jerusalem. And a friend of Jesus, a woman named Martha, invited Jesus and his disciples to stay in her home. She welcomed them as guests. Jesus and his followers gathered in Martha's home, and Luke doesn't mention her famous brother named Lazarus, but he does mention her sister named Mary. As Jesus was in Martha's home, it tells us that Mary was focused on what Jesus was saying. She was sitting at his feet, undistracted by everything that was going on. Martha, however, was the consummate host. And she was furiously distracted by taking care of the preparations and making sure that everyone had everything they needed and they were cared for. She reminded me of my mother, who in my entire life I never saw sit down during a holiday celebration. She was furiously distracted by caring for all the needs of everyone else. Finally, Martha becomes exasperated, and she probably awkwardly pressed her way into where Jesus was talking to a gathered group of people, including Mary at his feet. And she may have whispered, "You don't care, do you?" Literally, the way that it is phrased there is a case that implies a negative. She's not asking him if he cares. She's implying that she knows he doesn't. And she says, "You don't care, do you? I'm here doing all the work. And I'm doing it alone while my sister is just sitting here not contributing at all. You need to tell her to help me." Jesus knew the storm was gathering. He knew the days were growing darker, and he looked at Martha. And in the vocative case, which is a sign of emotion, he says in a very non-Brady Bunch way, "Martha, Martha." The second service really laughed at that. They thought that was hilarious. But you didn't like it that much. But it's an expression of his compassion. He says, Martha, Martha, you have so many things that you are distressed about and disturbed about and anxious and worried about. But there's only one thing that really matters. And that is the thing that Mary has chosen. Because she has chosen the thing that long after the anxiety and the storm has passed, this is the thing that will last. It's the thing that she cannot lose. It's the thing that will not be taken away from her. Now, you can read this story and you can say, well, I guess being busy is bad. But no, it's not. Being busy is a good thing, especially when the days are short. Especially when we see the storm approaching, when we realize the chaos of the world that we live in and the approaching darkness, and we hear the thunder and we know the storm is out there. It's time to be busy. It's time to be serving and caring and sharing. It's time to be putting ourselves out there. There is no time to waste. But it is easy in the busyness to forget the most important thing. That we can care for no one else's soul if we fail to care for our own. That in order to care for the needs of others, we must also make sure that our needs are cared for. You see, what Jesus says here in Luke chapter 10 is fascinating. The way Luke puts it, we translate it, Mary, you are worried about many things. The words are menis kai thoruadze. And it literally means you are anxious and disturbed. You are worried and upset. You are stressed out. It's as close as the Greek language comes to saying, you're freaking out right now. And he looks at Martha and he says, you're freaking out right now, Martha. I get it. I understand it. You see, he doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't say, oh, Martha, stop with your histrionics. Stop complaining. You're the perfect hostess. This is what you were born to do. We're all thankful for you. Mary's doing what she needs to do. You do what you need to do. He doesn't judge her. He doesn't rebuke her. He says to her, I get it. I understand that you're freaking out right now about all of these things. But there's one thing that matters more than all of this. And it's the thing that Mary has chosen. Luke records it poetically. It literally says, the good portion Mary has chosen. Mary has chosen the good portion. And the language of it is the language of a meal. It is figurative for what you say when a person takes the best cut of the meat or the best piece of the pie or asks for the best wine. They choose the best portion. They feed themselves the best of what is there. And I don't think it is wrong for us to stretch the analogy, to press into the metaphor, because we are junk food addicts. We live at a ferocious pace. And when you're a young family and you're raising young children and you're a dual income family where both the mom and the dad work, and your life is stressed and you have no margins, you don't have time. You don't have the luxury to prepare a family meal, to have all of the moments that families used to have. It's just too busy. So we settle and we live fast food lifestyles. In fact, we're too busy for fast food. You realize the fastest growing section of the restaurant industry right now is home delivery? And the fastest growing segment of home delivery is fast food. We are literally too busy to drive to Taco Bell to go through the drive-thru. So we pay $15 for an $8 order of tacos, so someone can bring it to us. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my fast food. That's why they call it comfort food, you know? You know why it's called comfort food? Because when everything else disappoints you, when everyone else disappoints you, when you wonder whether you are loved, a McDonald's French fry will always love you. It will always be there for you. It will always say, I am delicious just for you. And I will live on that. But I shouldn't, because we all know that's no way to survive. And unfortunately, we are seeing the rise of a generation of young adults who are raising the next generation of children and generations yet to be born, who are living on a diet of relational fast food and social fast food and political fast food and informational fast food and spiritual junk food. And while it may fill us up in the moment, it is not enough to sustain us in the storm. And if we cannot survive the storm, if we cannot find a refuge, how can we invite anyone else in from the chaos? We have to seek first our own spiritual health in order to be strong enough to serve those who are struggling, searching for the same thing. We cannot show anyone anything we have not already discovered. It was Jesus, and Mary, what was it that Mary found? What was it that she was doing? She crawled up beside Jesus and she was at his feet, listening to his words. The image I have is when my daughters were little, when they were toddlers, and they would crawl up into my lap and with a book, and they would say, Daddy, hold me. Daddy, read to me. When there was a storm and they were afraid, and they would climb into our bed and they would crawl under the covers, and we would wrap our arms around them, and somehow that sheets of fabric in the arms of their parents told them it was going to be okay. See, what Mary had chosen, what she had found, was the better portion. It was the portion where she crawled into the arms of her Savior. And she felt them around her. And she knew it would be okay. You see, he is the one who said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, all of you who are stressed and disturbed and anxious and afraid, all of you who are freaking out, come to me, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Feel my embrace around you. Feel my hands on your shoulders guiding you, and learn from me. Trust in me. Because I am meek and lowly of heart. I am humble and tenderhearted. I am compassionate, and I love you, and I will give you rest for your souls. I have a vision. I've always had a vision for this place. It's a vision of generosity. It's a vision of grace. It's a vision of inclusivity. It's a vision of making Austin a better place for all people. It's a vision of community that recognizes our need and our struggle and says, let's go together. But if we do not find refuge, we cannot invite others to what we have not found. We have to seek first our own spiritual health so that we can be strong enough to serve those who need our help. I have a vision for a greater breadth. I imagine a day 10 years from now, the year 2029, we are gathered here celebrating our 50th anniversary. And we are celebrating the countless ways that we have improved the lives and served those in need and introduced people to the saving grace of Christ. And we have walked the walk. And the breadth of that will grow. I imagine that, and I know that will happen. That is the story that has been written for 40 years. But it's part of my vision that we will not just grow wider, but we will also grow deeper. Because when we grow deeper, we grow stronger. And the storm clouds are gathering. The horizon is filled with flashes of lightning, and you can hear the distant thunder. You hear the chaos and the voices of the social commentary and the cruelty and the brutality that seems to be running recklessly through our society, through our world. He saw the storm clouds gathering too, and he invited us to find rest in him. I think we have to be a people that hungers for a genuine experience with the presence of God and intentionally seeks that. You ever been on an airplane and they warn you that if there's a loss of cabin pressure, there's an oxygen mask that drops down? And what do they tell you to do? Make sure that you secure it on yourself before you try to help those around you. The first rule of being a lifeguard is you don't save anyone from drowning if you go out and drown yourself. We must seek first our spiritual health and the refuge in his arms so that we can invite those whose cry of their heart is for shelter to find it here among us. This is the DNA of Riverbend. To welcome the bruised, the battered, the broken, the bored, to be a place that builds a community of inclusion, not of exclusion. This is the mission of Riverbend, to take that message of grace and that practice of generosity to bless others as we have been blessed. And this is the future of Riverbend Church. And this is what we are celebrating today. This is why this is a good day. This is why this is a day worthy of celebration of sausage wraps and Kona ice. This is a really good day. 40 years of a story that God has been writing, and he will continue to write in the decades to come. Happy anniversary, Riverbend.